This trip took us south through Newcastle to stop at the first night at Jerry's Plains. From there we travelled on to my daughter's farm near Dunnedoo for the weekend. Then we headed northwest up into Gulargambone for a couple of days, then to overnight at Burren Junction before heading north to Lightning Ridge. We then retraced our steps past Burren Junction to stop at Wee Waa for a couple of nights, and then heading into Narrabri as some bad weather was coming. From there we travelled up to Bingara for a few days free camping before heading to Glen Innes, Man River and north to Iluka on the coast. From Iluka it was south to Woolgoolga and then finally home. The first day saw us drive down to Jerry's Plains to free camp at the reserve. There were 6 vans in for the night. Next day we drove through the Hunter Valley to Dunnedoo, and even though my daughter's farm's dams were full and there was a tinge of green, the whole area is in drought and many of the farms have had to destock. On the Monday we drove to Gulargambone and we stopped at the great caravan park there. We got a really nice green grassy site. Over the winter this park is full, and I'm sure that many a great evening spent round this fireplace, and the proceeds of the dinners all go to the Flying Doctor service. This time of year there's not a lot going on, but this is a very active community, and the post office is now a regional transaction centre, housing many government agencies and credit union, and the town has now themed itself with corrugated iron galahs. And many buildings and walls have been painted. The latest is this great artwork called Ghosts of Bullocks Past. I think it's just brilliant. Well done, Gulargambone. On the Wednesday morning we drove to Burren Junction Hot Springs over what must be the last of the major dirt roads in the area. These hot springs in the camping area around are free, and though the winter is very busy, when we visited it was much quieter with only a few vans in. We were able to camp very close to the actual springs. These community springs are closed from November through to March each year to conserve water, but the water temperature is around 39 degrees. And it was nice to see some green grass. Now it was going to be a 40-degree day, so we packed up early and headed for Lightning Ridge. After 2.5 hours, we arrived in town. The town's actually looking very civilized these days. We had booked into the Opal Caravan Park just a little to the east of town and close to another hot spring. The next day we decided to drive around to Glengarry, another remote mining town area. About 75 kilometers, takes well over an hour. With the hotel being called the Hilton, out there you know it's the great Australian humour is still alive. But we're told that actually the Tucker's great. Now there are many 1 and 2 man type operations in this area, and the lure of opal is obviously still very strong. And unusually this looked like a pretty big operation. Amazingly, out here they can also grow crops. These are huge paddocks running for kilometres. But with the drought, there's no plantings this year. We thought this dust was raised by a car or truck, but no, just the heat of the sun warming the ground to create thermals. And also surprisingly is that sheep can still thrive in this country. Back at Lightning Ridge, we looked at the website and found out these car door tours. There's 4 of them. The blue around town, the red to the south of town. The green goes to the west and then north. And the yellow tour is to the southwest of town. We followed the red tour from where it was close to the caravan park. It takes you around in a little loop and around the old town, the original town area. Some very interesting architecture. Now the green tour takes you to the highest point in the area, past many small mines. And there's also a memorial here to the first ever digging. On the Monday, we departed, retracing our steps back past Burren Junction and on to Wee Waa, stopping at a pleasant if somewhat rustic caravan park. Now halfway between Wee Waa and Narrabri is a CSIRO Australian Telescope Compact Array at the Pole Wild Observatory. This telescope consists of 6 22-metre dishes that run on a 3-kilometre railway. So the dishes can all be moved to any position along this railway. The visitor centre is really worth a visit and has some quite interesting items. Outside, there's also many different displays. apostle birds will be always there to welcome you. Now just a few kilometers away is a 3-kilometer diameter Yarry Lake. Because of the drought, unfortunately it was empty, so I borrowed this photograph from the council website. We might have to revisit that in the future. Tuesday morning, we left Wee Waa and drove to 50 kilometers to Narrabri, checking in at the Big Sky Caravan Park. The following day we drove to the Waa Gorge, which is only an hour or so to the northeast. And we're quite surprised to find a great car park and toilet block and all at the end of the track. So we followed this track up to the pools and the waterfall. It was all pretty straightforward with just a few steps here and there. Unfortunately, there was no water in the creek. We arrived at our destination, the Milled-Pulla pools. The walk goes further into the gorge, but the thunderstorms around, we thought it was best not to go up there, so we climbed up to the top pool. There's no water flowing out, but at least there was some water in this one. The following day we drove up to Mount Caputar, stopping at the Doug Sky Lookout. This whole area is absolutely beautiful, and a couple of the walks I did there are on YouTube. From there we drove up to the summit lookout. Just love this area. Driving back down, you get some great views of these very rugged mountains. Now we drove across to Bingara to do some free camping along the Gywdir River. Wiki Camps shows all these great camping areas. We settled on a lovely spot just 3 kilometers out of town and set up the free camp for a few days. Now this area was just so great to sit around and soak in the scenery. In fact, it was just too easy to sit and watch the wildlife on the opposite shore. We even had a duck that befriended us. It would come and sit with us without any fear. However, we did take the kayaks out for a couple of paddles, both upstream, until it got a bit too shallow, and then downstream. When it got a bit shallow again, we turned back to our camp. It was very hard to tear ourselves away from this spot, but we headed off to Glen Innes via Inverell to stay at the showgrounds again. And we visited the museum at the old hospital. The old children's ward is still intact. And next to the nurse's home was a great old machinery shed. how about this for a vat? Leaving Glen Innes, we head up for the Gibraltar Range on the way to Man River, and we stopped at the Boundary Falls picnic area again. Last time we were here, Di missed out because she wasn't well, so we decided to redo the Falls walk. It's still a beautiful walk. After that, we walked the 2 and a bit kilometers round trip into the Lyrebird Falls. Now this trek is very well signposted. We were again surprised by this beautiful wild country views. Once we had settled into the Man River Caravan Park, we walked down to the river. After our overnight stop, we headed for Iluka on the coast. Now, Iluka is on the north side of the Clarence River entrance, with Yamba on the south side. Our first stop was up to the bluff. Now this was really well set up, with made steps and stairs taking you up to the lookout. The lookout had nice views to Yamba, so next day we decided to take the ferry over there. Now the ferry takes a very twisty course, heading through a gap in the training walls, then around the islands to arrive at the ferry jetty. Thankfully the ferry terminal is just next to the caravan park, and the ferry arrived on schedule. And half an hour later or so, the ferry arrives at Yamba. We walked into town, and then we walked up to the lighthouse, passing a really nice surf beach. Now across on the other side of the lighthouse is another great surf beach. Looks like a really nice brick. There's a nice 8-kilometer return walk from the caravan park to the North Arm, following the water's edge around the bay behind the training walls, going past some remains of the construction work before heading out onto the North Arm. Now, for over 100 years there have been plans to try to make this entrance safer. We've just got a nice track to walk along. The training wall really makes this a very pleasant, flat and safe anchorage. About halfway along this walk, near to where the training walls actually come back to the shore, there are the remains of an old crane. Now, this crane was used to lift the concrete blocks from the barges and put them onto a railway that took these blocks out to the end of the wall. And the walk actually follows the old railway line here out to the wall. Now, there's some great information about Moriarty's wall there. Now, walking across a small beach, we eventually arrive at the north wall. And here there's a nice view back to the Iluka bluff. And so we arrived at the end of the wall. And you can certainly see that the walls are doing their job. A nice, calm, flat entrance. So now we started heading south, stopping at Woolgoolga for a few days. Now this beautiful beach was just a few meters from our caravan. Walking along the beach, we could also see the remains of a wreck of the Buster. Had its home on the beach here for 125 years. One day we drove down to Dunnedoo, up in the mountains, mainly to have a look at Gywdir Falls. Just next to the car park, it's a great lookout. Of course, we had to walk down to the bottom to have a look. But it's well worth the effort. On the way back, we called in at Coffs Harbour, going to the jetty in order to walk over to Muttonbird Island. Now, a couple of years ago, huge seas breached the breakwater here on the right, but thankfully it's now been all rebuilt and the marina is now back in action. It was a nice walk through the new breakwater, past all the large concrete blocks, and then out to the end of Muttonbird Island. A nice way to finish our trip.